Welcome to the Football Film Room Show. I'm Nick Kehoe, and we've got another great episode for you today. We're going to continue our 2026 NFL season preview, going division by division. We've covered 4 divisions so far: NFC East, AFC East, NFC North, AFC North. And today we're going to continue with the NFC South as our division of focus. Now, the best thing with the NFC South is that any team in this division has the chance to win the division. There are certainly favorites, but it would not be a surprise to see the Panthers, the Buccaneers, the Falcons, or the Saints win the division because it is wide open. But with that being said, we're going to go in order of the division standings from last year, which means we're going to start with the Carolina Panthers, the 2025 NFC South division champs, despite having just an 8-9 record. Now, there are all sorts of questions I have with this Panthers team. Number one, they have a ton of injuries that they're already dealing with. Both their tackles are out to start the season, and there's kind of not a firm timeline on when they're actually going to be returning. So the Panthers did have to go to Plan B to bring in players like Rasheed Walker and draft Monroe Freeling to be their starting tackles, at least at the beginning of the year. And that'll be something to watch because you really don't want to have questions with your offensive line, especially going into a season. Another big issue with the Panthers is their pass rush. Their pass rush has been at the bottom of the NFL over the last few seasons. And despite the fact that they have a really good secondary and players like J.C. Horn and Mike Jackson, and even though they were able to perform pretty well last year despite the absence of a pass rush, eventually not being able to get to the quarterback catches up with the defense. It certainly did in their playoff loss to the Rams, a game that they were in until the very end, until the Rams just decided to put the ball in Matthew Stafford's hands and pass rush couldn't really do much about it. So the Panthers are a bit of a mixed bag in this department because they went out and tried to address that area. They got Jalen Phillips in free agency. He should be able to provide a bit of a boost. But unfortunately, they also lost second-year defensive end Nick Skouerton to a knee injury during training camp. And so it's a bit like taking one step forward and one step back with that pass rush. So we'll see what Ejiro Evero is able to do, the defensive coordinator, to generate a pass rush. We'll see if Phillips can have an impact despite Skouerton being out. So those will be 2 things to watch, the trenches on both sides of the ball. The biggest question with this team, though, is with their quarterback, Bryce Young. Now, he's entering his 4th season, and he's come a long way. He had a very rough rookie season. Wasn't really an advantageous situation. Coach got fired, 11 games in? He had a bunch of turnstiles blocking for him up front. His receivers couldn't get open, couldn't create separation. He had nowhere to go with the ball. So he had a terrible rookie season, but it wasn't necessarily all his fault. It was just a disastrous situation. But then he came back in year 2, Dave Canales, new head coach, and he got benched after 2 bad games. And I talked about this last year. I talked about it on actually the very first episode of the Football Film Room Show. But I think him getting benched actually saved his career to a certain extent. Because there's something that happens to a quarterback when you finally do get benched. It's almost like you go out there afterwards and you play with a little bit more reckless abandon. You don't have the paralysis by analysis. You just kind of let it go a little bit more. Because the biggest fear you have as a quarterback is getting benched in the first place. The quarterback position is not like any other position in sports. If you're not the guy, you don't play. Right? You can talk about any other sport. Baseball, you're the second best shortstop in the team. Well, if you can hit, they're going to find a spot for you in the field so you can get into the lineup and get some reps every day. If you're the 3rd best guard on your team in basketball, yeah, maybe you don't start, but you're going to be the first guy in off the bench potentially. Even if you're a goalie in hockey, if you're the backup goalie in hockey, you're still going to have a bunch of games that you play in during the season to at least give the starting goalie some rest. And we see it all the time where the backup goalie performs so well that they end up forcing themselves into the lineup and end up taking the job because they actually get to play. When you're a quarterback, if you're on the bench, you don't get to play. The only way you get to play is if the guy ahead of you gets injured or if he performs poorly. And that's not a situation you want to be in as a backup quarterback. You don't want to be rooting for that to happen. So I think the benching actually saved Bryce Young's career. He came back a few weeks later and played much better. Just much crisper decision-making, more confidence with the way he was delivering the ball. You could see it on film. And he ended that second season on a high note and continued to build off of it last year. I hesitate to say he led the Panthers to the playoffs. I mean, they were an 8-9 team, but you do have to give him credit. And he did perform well in that playoff game. The Panthers were a couple of minutes away from stealing that game from the Rams and moving on to the divisional round. But he played well. played well throughout the season. Set career highs for completion percentage, yards, touchdown passes, passer rating. So he's improved every single year that he's been in the NFL, which is a great thing to see. But while that's good to see within the vacuum of Bryce Young's career itself, compared to the rest of the NFL, the Panthers need to see more. Yes, he had career highs, but those numbers weren't exactly dynamic. 63.6 completion percentage, 3,011 yards, 23 touchdown passes, 87.8 passer rating. Those are all career highs, and those are middle of the pack in the NFL to kind of the bottom half of the league in terms of where those numbers rank. And the passing game as a whole finished 26th in the NFL. Obviously not very good. They were 21st in completions of 20 yards or more, so they didn't get a bunch of big plays. They were 25th on third down, that's the quarterback's down. So I'm interested to see if he can finally make a huge leap in 2026. Now, we know he has physical limitations as a passer, but he really does play the position with a high level of nuance. Good at processing, good at throwing with anticipation, all those high-level traits you need to be a great quarterback, he has most of them. And I think that's helped him improve. He's a smart quarterback, a high football IQ. So having those traits are a promising thing and can potentially help him make that big leap that the Panthers are just waiting for. But he's going to have to be damn near perfect because he doesn't have the physical ability to not be exact with his timing, to not be exacting with everything that he does. And if that Panthers offensive line takes a step back based on all the new faces they're going to have, the job's going to be even more difficult for Bryce Young. But I have confidence in him individually as a player. I just don't know that I believe, based on the pieces he has around him, that he can make a big leap this year. All right, let's move along to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And this was a team that just had a frustrating 2025 season, didn't they? Started off 6-2. Baker Mayfield was in the MVP discussion. They looked like a team that could make some major hay in the NFC, and they just fell off a cliff. Ended up losing 7 of their last 9 games. Big reason for that was injury. Baker Mayfield, as you probably saw in the Netflix quarterback series, battled through a lot, wasn't healthy for most of the year, had injuries all over the place. The receiving core was banged up. They lost Mike Evans. It was the first time in Evans' career that he didn't reach 1,000 receiving yards, and that was because he wasn't in the lineup for most of the season. Chris Godwin still didn't play a ton coming back from injuries the year before. So this was a banged-up team on offense, but they showed you their potential in the first half of the season. And so you look to 2026 and you say, there's no reason why, as long as they stay healthy, there's no reason why they can't play an entire season like they did in the first half of 2025. And a lot of that obviously starts with Baker Mayfield. Now, Mayfield, whatever you think about him as far as where he ranks in the NFL among quarterbacks, he has shown the ability to play at a very, very high level. I mean, you can see it in the way he grasps the game mentally. Some of the things last year he did, particularly in that Jets game, I did a breakdown on this, but how he recognized a blitz from earlier in the game and then set the protection in a way that made it a non-factor that allowed him to get a huge completion and put them in the field goal range. He manipulates defenders. He's pretty accurate as a thrower. He's got a strong arm as a thrower. He can scramble a little bit. You've seen him in the 2-minute drill be very effective, particularly in the first half last season. I mean, he can do all the things that you need a franchise quarterback to do. I won't get into all the contracts and what he should be paid or should the Buccaneers have locked him up before this season. Won't get into any of that, but just purely as a football player, as a quarterback, he's a very good player. You'd be happy to have him as your quarterback. I mean, there was a 1.5-year stretch from 2024 to halfway through last season where he was an MVP caliber player. 2024, he completed over 70% of his passes for 4,500 yards and 41 touchdowns. Had a 106.8 passer rating, which is right in line with last year's MVP, Matthew Stafford. Then last year, started the season with a 16-2 TD to INT ratio and a 99.2 passer rating. I mean, he was playing at a very high level and has shown that he can do that for long periods of time. Now, I think the questions for the Buccaneers on the offensive side of the ball are, who's he going to be throwing to? Because Mike Evans is gone. This is the first time they're going to have to deal with Mike Evans not being on the roster in a long time. And look, that's a major loss. He's a 6'5" target. He calms things down for the quarterback because he can win one-on-ones consistently. He can play above the defense. He's physical, has good body control, can snatch the ball out of the air, win on those back shoulder throws. He's not going to be easy to replace. And I don't think they'll replace him with just one guy, right? Emeka Egbuka is going to play more of a role. Chris Godwin hopefully is a little bit more healthy this year and spends more time on the field. Jalen McMillan, who had a great rookie year 2 years ago but missed all of last season with a neck injury, he figures to play a bit bigger of a role. They drafted Ted Hurst in the third round, who's 6'4", and he's kind of the vertical threat for this team. He's the guy who can be that big receiver, play above the defense like Evans did, and also be a vertical downfield threat. So they have bits and pieces. It's a little bit of the Moneyball approach, where you're replacing Jason Giambi and Johnny Damon with a bunch of other guys and sort of compiling the numbers that they have and adding up to a player that equals Giambi and Johnny Damon. Well, it's kind of the same thing here with Mike Evans. It seems like that's the approach that the Buccaneers are taking. So we'll see how that goes, but I expect this offense to hit the ground running in 2026. Now, while Baker Mayfield and the offense are obviously very important, this team doesn't go anywhere without that defense getting back to what it traditionally has been under Todd Bowles. Because the last 2 years, it's kind of fallen off. They were 16th in points allowed in 2024, 20th last year. Just wasn't really the same type of defense. And for this team to win, and I mean win anything significant, they're going to have to be similar to a Todd Bowles defense of old. And that starts with pressure on the quarterback. Last year, their inability to generate pressure was really the main culprit in their defensive woes. They finished just 25th in the NFL in pressure percentage, and that's a really bad thing when you're a defense that is as aggressive as Todd Bowles' defense has been. He loves to blitz. He loves to put pressure on the quarterback, mentally and physically. But when you're blitzing, you are sacrificing defenders in coverage, which means you better get home. And the fact that the Buccaneers ranked 4th in blitz percentage last season but just 25th in pressure percentage, that tells you everything. Led to them giving up some big plays in the passing game, not being as effective. There were several games in the second half of the season where they didn't even look competitive. So they need to get back to what they were previously under Bowles, and it starts with the pass rush. And so the Buccaneers set out to rectify that issue with their defense this offseason. They signed Al-Qadim Muhammad, who had a breakout year last year with 11 sacks. They also added Reuben Bain with the 15th overall pick. And Bain he's a thick human being. He wins with power. He wins with leverage. He wins with relentless pursuit of the quarterback. He's like a boulder rolling downhill. You give him an inch and he just keeps picking up momentum. If you don't stop him early, he's going to run you over. And that's how he gets to the quarterback. He's going to be a great addition to this defense because he also stops the run. And that's been one of the key characteristics of Todd Bowles' defenses. He stops the run, makes offenses be one-dimensional. So I think Bain will be a great fit there. I do think this defense is going to be improved. Also added Alex Anzalone, revamped their linebacking core. And if they can get back to being a top 10 defense, they will win the division. All right, the Atlanta Falcons are our next team, and there are really two big issues with them. Quarterback and their pass rush. We'll start with the quarterback situation. Michael Penix, coming back from yet another knee injury, absolutely sucks because I like the way he plays. I like the way he played in college. He's got a strong arm, plays with good timing, throws with good anticipation, attacks downfield. One of the best downfield throwers in football. He had a really good final 3 games of his rookie season, and that seemed to be a jumping off point for what should have been a great second year. Ended up not starting off so hot, battled through some injuries, and then obviously had the season-ending knee injury. And it doesn't seem like he'll be ready to go in week 1. Don't know for sure, but I think the Falcons should slow play him coming back. I know they might not be that excited about Tua Tagovailoa playing, or fans of the Falcons might not be excited about Tua playing, but he's a decent fit for what new head coach Kevin Stefanski likes to do on offense. Stefanski has a rhythm and timing passing game. As we all know, Tua, he is a rhythm and timing passer. Plays with great anticipation, hits his back foot, gets the ball out. That's how he wants to play. I don't think there'd be any harm to letting him start the season, play the first few games, ease Michael Penix back into things, allow him to fully recover from his injury, allow him to fully acclimate, feel comfortable on that knee, feel as though he can execute at 100%, because there is still the chance that Penix can be the quarterback of the future here. So I think the Falcons should take the approach of developing him almost as if he's a rookie, right? Wait till he's ready, then at the right moment, bring him in. The one caveat to that would be unless Tua is just going gangbusters and the Falcons start off 6-0 and have the number 1 offense in the NFL. Then it makes sense to play the hot hand, and maybe you got something with Tua. But I don't think Tua is going to be the quarterback of the future here. I don't think the Falcons think he's going to be the quarterback of the future. I think they see him as a nice stopgap, a guy who can execute Stefanski's system effectively the way he wants to while they wait for Penix to come back. And I think they give Penix the shot, or they should give him the shot, to become the quarterback of the future for this team. Now, I know he might have a lot of cards stacked against him. The issue is injury history. I think Penix, if he is given enough time to play, could develop into something really good for this team. It's always about the injuries, unfortunately, with him. But do what you can to put him in the right position and give him a chance to develop into the quarterback that the Falcons wanted him to be when they drafted him 8th overall. Because you've got a much more likely opportunity of him being your guy moving forward than you do of Tua, in my opinion. Either way, whoever's playing quarterback, they better be turning and giving the ball to Bijan Robinson a lot. And we know Stefanski likes to run the ball. He likes to major in the run. Hasn't done so quite as much in recent years, but hasn't really had the players to do so. He's got arguably the best back in the game in Bijan Robinson. So given the quarterback situation, given the injuries that both of those quarterbacks are prone to be dealing with, I think we're going to see a healthy amount of Bijan Robinson this year. I think Stefanski's going to load him up. An equally big question that the Falcons have, though, is on the other side of the ball, and it's with their pass rush. They have traditionally not been a very good pass rushing team, at least over the last decade or so. And then last year, defensive coordinator Jeff Ulbrich, he turned them into a dynamic pass rushing group. Atlanta set a franchise record with 57 sacks, ranked 2nd in the NFL in sacks. And Ulbrich did this in a couple different ways. One, he leaned on pressure schemes. The Falcons were 2nd in the NFL in blitz percentage last season, but they also had a bunch of good young pass rushers. They had 2 rookie edge rushers in James Pierce, who had 10.5 sacks, and Jalen Walker, who had 5.5 sacks, both of whom they took in the first round last year. Unfortunately, they're not going to be seeing a lot of either player this season. James Pierce, obviously dealing with those legal issues. He was just suspended for 8 games. And Jalen Walker, who was expected to shoulder more of the load this season, he's done for the year with a knee injury. So now the Falcons really have no one to rush the quarterback in the first half of the season, which means they're screwed. No, it means they're probably going to be blitzing a lot more, trying to generate pressure with scheme. But as the Buccaneers found out last year, just because you bring pressure doesn't mean you're going to get pressure. You have to have the guys up front who are going to generate a pass rush when you're rushing just 4, and who will be effective in their pass rush when you are blitzing. And so the Falcons are going to be missing that for much of the season. And you combine that with their quarterback situation, it's looking kind of bleak for Kevin Stefanski's first year, I'll be honest. All right, let's get to our final team, the New Orleans Saints. The Saints last year seemed to be angling for the number 1 overall pick. Started off the year 1-8. Things seemed pretty bleak. But then they made a change at quarterback, put Spencer Rattler on the bench, brought Tyler Shuck in. Shuck, they drafted last year in the 2nd round. That's obviously some valuable draft capital, so they didn't just pick him with no intention of playing him. And Shuck, I think, surprised a lot of people. You can make the argument that he had the best year of any rookie quarterback last season. And I'm not saying that because of the numbers he put up. Shuck was 5-4 as a starter, and I guess he was decent in the box score category, but really it was over his last 5 games where he started to pick things up. It was during that stretch the Saints went 4-1, and he completed nearly 70% of his passes for 8.1 yards per attempt, both of which are really, really good. Had a 5-2 TD to INT ratio, a 99.1 passer rating. Also ran for 135 yards and 3 touchdowns over that span. A lot of people don't probably realize that Shuck is a pretty athletic guy. He's a big quarterback, 6'4", 6'5", so you don't necessarily think of him that way, but he can move. He can make plays on the run. He can make those second reaction throws, use his legs to scramble for first downs, scramble for touchdowns. But the biggest thing with him is that he was probably the most refined pocket passer that we saw from last year's rookie class. And that, I think, helped give the Saints some consistency on offense. He's good in the quick game, can attack downfield, for the most part makes good decisions, throws with anticipation. He's got a lot of tools that head coach Kellen Moore can work with. And I'm excited to see what he does in year 2 because it was very promising what was going on in New Orleans in the second half of last season with Shuck under center. Now, he's got some areas that he needs to address in terms of handling pressure. Sometimes he's a little overreactive to bodies in front of him. He sees a jersey flash and he'll flee the pocket. You see that in a lot of rookie quarterbacks, but that's really the area of his game that he needs to get better at. With that being said, he's got a lot to work with, as I just said. Biggest issue with the Saints is, do they have enough around him? He did not have a lot of help. There were not a lot of explosive players around him. Chris Olave had a good year, but they needed someone else on the other side to challenge the defense. And that's why they took Jordan Tyson with the 8th overall pick in this year's draft. Tyson is arguably the most dangerous receiver in this draft, but his issue was injuries. He's very injury prone. And unfortunately, that trend has continued, and he hasn't even played it down in the NFL. Tyson just injured his hamstring a few days ago, and he'll be out for a couple of months, which completely stinks, but this was the thing that everyone feared. This is why some teams were not willing or were afraid of drafting him. And it might not completely derail his season, might not completely derail his career, but it's not a great start for a player that the Saints were hoping would add another dimension to this offense. Now, on the other side of the ball, you hope that the Saints can pick up where they left off in the second half of last season. New Orleans' first 9 games last year were kind of rough on defense, played a big role in their 1-8 start. They allowed about 27 points and 333 yards per game. But they picked things up in the second half. Cut that 27 points per game average to just 17.5, allowed about 70 fewer yards per game. And a big reason for that was the pass rush. Cam Jordan and Chase Young, who are both back this year, they kind of came on in the second half of the season. Jordan had his best season in 4 years, had 8 sacks over those final 8 games. Chase Young had a career year with 10 total sacks, including 7 over his final 8 games. So that would explain why the second half of the season went a lot better for the Saints, I think. But I also think Brandon Staley's defensive scheme played a role as well. I think a big part of the first half of the season struggles for the Saints were that they were getting used to his new scheme, getting used to the communication, how to respond to different formations and personnel groupings and whatnot, figuring out how to execute, figuring out how to play fast. But in the second half of last year, they sort of realized what the heck it was they were doing. And the interesting thing with Staley is that, he's been a split safety defensive coach for several years now. That was kind of how he cut his teeth. That was how he developed a reputation. That's how he became sort of the defensive coordinator in 2020 after he led the Rams to the number 1 overall defense in both points allowed and yards allowed. That's what landed him his head coaching job with the Chargers, which ended up being a bit of a disaster on the defensive side of the ball. But then last year, he made a big switch. The Saints played the second highest frequency of single high coverage. And that's kind of an interesting change for a guy who lived in that Fangio 2-show world. But it'll be interesting to see what they do this year and if they continue that trend. The bottom line, though, is that the Saints do have a chance at the division. They haven't won it since 2020, Drew Brees' last season. But I think there's a little bit of hope, despite the injuries they've been dealing with during training camp, that this year might be the year. That's it for today's show. Thank you all for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like and subscribe on Apple, iTunes, Spotify, Substack, YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcasts. Go check out footballfilmroom.com. Started to do some all-22 breakdowns of some of the preseason action. We, of course, have our individual team previews up on the site. You can get a little bit more in-depth information than you can on the podcast. You can analyze some numbers, click on some links, look at some film breakdowns. We'll be back next week to preview the AFC South. But I think that's everything I've got for you today. I'll talk to you next time.